Hello, I'm Elise Ossenbaugh from JP Morgan Wealth Management's Global Investment Strategy team, and I'm excited to be joined today by my colleague Vinny Amaru. What we're here to talk about is the way that the global economic and market landscape is shifting right before our eyes. As I start to think through what the underlying theme is, what I'm finding is that security and defense on the part of policymakers is an increasing focus in the global landscape. You think about everything going on with the geopolitical conflicts around the world, or the evolutions of trade policy, even tech innovation, and all of those roads lead us back to this conversation. Vinny here is going to talk us through the way that that definition of defense and security is evolving and why, and also some of the considerations for investors as we think through what the follow-on implications of that shifting definition may be.
I think the last 5 years in general has really shed a light on how security can come in so many different ways, or said differently, how many potentially vulnerabilities there are in 21st century economies. The way we like to think about it is three major buckets, right? The first is going to be this supply chain and energy security. Then the second one is the traditional defense. I think we're seeing that maybe, tanks certainly still play a part, but we're seeing that, again, like technology move forward, drones becoming much more of a tool on the battlefield than it had been in the past. And so that opens up a completely different question of technology and supply chain. And then the third, which I think really interweaves its way into both of those, but I think does require to be talked about on a standalone basis, is just technology. And here, I think there are two major threads. I think the first is protecting what you have, so cybersecurity and defense, and making sure that you're vulnerable, or potentially vulnerable information of an economy or a government isn't susceptible to being used against you. And the second is where you're going and how artificial intelligence can be thought of as its own pillar of security, but also how does that start to reshape alliances and, again, the way that we think about defense going forward. So a lot in there, but I think the point is it is more multifaceted than I think we've really talked about in the past.
But now, from your perspective as an economist, I would love to start to explore some of the policy reactions that we've seen in the US, but also internationally, and the way that those reactions might inform the path forward when we think about the backdrop against which we'll be investing over the next 10, 20, even 30 years.
Unfortunately, we do have to talk about the pandemic. I think it was a watershed moment for a lot of different reasons, and it reshaped a lot of policy response to that.
Yes.
And then I think the other one that we can build upon is, Russia-Ukraine conflict and a lot of the ramifications of what countries are learning. The interesting thing about the pandemic is that we had all been very used to just-in-time supply chains, right? The fact that we could all order something and we knew by and large it was going to be at our doorstep in a few days. Of course, the pandemic shows that when you have a significant shock, those can all go away. You didn't really have redundancy in the system where you could pull on different levers to make sure that everything flowed accordingly. But I think from a policy perspective, right, you also understood that you couldn't get semiconductors for a long period of time. There are actually electrical equipment parts that you still can't get, right? It's that backlogged. And so as a policy response, I think what you've seen, let's take the U.S. as an example, like the CHIPS Act, is one in the U.S., which was really providing subsidies, grants to build domestic semiconductor manufacturing. You saw this vulnerability, and the policy response is how do we mitigate that vulnerability? And I think as investors, that will continue. If you fast forward to the Trump administration, tariffs are a policy tool to bring back that domestic manufacturing. So to the extent that you have this carryover from the previous administration of the grants and subsidies, you're seeing it also on the protectionism side from the Trump administration. And then also from the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, it has provisions in there to speed up domestic manufacturing in terms of immediate expensing of research and development.
And notably, the US hasn't been the only country who's kind of pursued these different avenues of policy meant to incentivize or maybe bring domestic investment back. Europe is another example that comes to mind coming out of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, but I think also in the context of this wave of kind of protectionist policy. Do you want to touch on that?
While we talk about, different countries pursuing maybe their own policy, like in a individualistic sense, it has spillovers to all other, so many other countries, because frankly, to make these types of machinery, you need inputs, right? And those inputs are going to come from, they are going to come from the likes of China. They're going to come from, allies in terms of Canada, different parts of Europe. So all of these things are interconnected, which to us is, again, one of the reasons why we can look at any one policy in any one country, but the investment implications span across borders. It's not just investing in the US or investing in Europe, because you're going to see beneficiaries across borders.
What's so interesting to me is a lot of investors might have the knee-jerk impulse to associate this conversation with risk. Risk to the investment's outlook, risk in terms of market volatility that may arise as a result of either geopolitical flare-ups or some of the policy uncertainty associated with it. And I think there are also these dynamics related to global realignment as all of these pieces kind of move around that could present new opportunities for investors. So I would love to just double click there before we wrap up in thinking through the opportunities that this might present within markets and how we're guiding investors to think about them.
The one that comes to mind most when we're talking about realignment and the way that security can shape the world going forward has to be in artificial intelligence in so many ways. And I think we're watching the race happen, right? We're seeing significant investment in the United States. That's, again, very exciting from an opportunity set perspective, because it's not just developed markets, right? It's how do emerging markets benefit from artificial intelligence? And to your point on productivity, how do these emerging market economies potentially implement artificial intelligence in a way that, say, in a country like India, could maybe narrow the education gap?
There's a lot that remains to be seen in terms of exactly how this is going to play out. But when we think through how markets are responding to it today, it's clear that the trend is underway. You talked about opportunities across sectors. There isn't just one place to look to play this. It could be through industrials, through technology, even through staid sectors or traditionally staid sectors like utilities, for example, that all of a sudden have this secular growth story, and it's global. We have many tools at our disposal to help you unearth the opportunities and ways to potentially play this in your portfolio. And our JP Morgan Wealth Management advisors are also there to help guide you to determine how it might make sense in the context of your overall financial plan. Our investing platform, for example, has a ton of amazing tools and screeners that you can use to sift through a very broad global opportunity set and determine specific ways to play themes that we might have high conviction in. I'm excited to invite Christine Etheridge onto the call with us today to do a demonstration of how some of those tools work.
Thanks, Elise. Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Etheridge, Head of Online Investing Client Adoption. It's my pleasure today to be able to show you how you can easily create a custom ETF screen to explore the opportunities that Vinny and Elise spoke about, specifically investment opportunities in technology, energy, AI, and defense sectors. So we'll start by logging into chase.com. From here, now that I'm logged in, I can select investments. And then underneath investments, select find investments. Now I can see all of the asset classes available to me. I can search for mutual funds, money market funds, ETFs, stocks, and fixed income. And I'll select ETFs. And I can see there are a set of preset screeners to explore the full catalog, but I will select creating a custom screen so I can search for the topics that Vinny and Elise highlighted today. Once I've selected that, I am in the new screener. On the left are all the criteria that I can search on. So in this case, go ahead and select sector equity. Underneath sector equity, there are a number of options. So in this case, I'll select technology and equity energy. I have 184 results at this stage, so I'm going to narrow the list further. I can actually select Morningstar rating or even expense ratio. So in this case, I will select Morningstar 5 stars. And then for the gross expense ratio, I'm going to select less than 0.5%. I now have a manageable list of results, 7 results. I can go ahead and choose to sort by any of the sort filters. I could also decide that I want to search for any of these other categories of search results on the left. In this case, I'm going to choose to sort based on market return, and gross expense ratio. I can also choose to go ahead and select description so I can see the full display of any of one of these securities, and select any one of these securities to investigate further by searching for quote. We hope you continue to use our online tools. If you have an advisor, reach out to learn more about ETFs. And if you'd like to learn more, go to chase.com/investments.
We've only scratched the surface on the ways that this evolving definition of security and defense might inform the economic and investments landscape in the years to come. If you're curious to explore more of our insights, you can visit chase.com/theknow. Thanks so much for joining us.